March 17th, 2025. It's 1:02. Mr. General, well, first I'm calling the meeting to order. Mr. General Manager, do we have a quorum, please?
Madam Chair, I'll read through roll call. Director Don Deere. Here. Chairwoman Gloria Gray.
Here.
Director Scott Houston. Director Tommy Favai. Director Desi Alvarez. Madam Chair, we do not have a quorum of the Board of Directors. However, we do have both committee members, the chair and the member. Therefore, we may proceed with this meeting. However, we'll add any action items that are moved by the committee to the action calendar at the board meeting. They will not go on consent.
All right. Item 3, public comment. Do we have anyone from the public who would wish to speak?
Madam Chair, there are no requests for any public comment.
Okay, the next item would be presentation. Any presentation?
Madam Chair, we do not have any presentations.
Item 5, action calendar. Item 8, please present that item, please.
Yes, Madam Chair. Item 5A begins on packet page 3. The recommended action is to adopt a support position on SB 31, water quality and recycled water. And for this presentation, we do have Augustine Hahn, our water policy and resources analyst, too.
Thank you, EJ. Madam Chair and Director Deere. I am before you to recommend adopt a support position on SB 31, water quality and recycled water. If we can move over to the slides that have been prepared. Desiree, if we could, thank you. All right. The next slide. So just in summary, Title 22 of the California Code of Regulations define the allowable recycled water applications, required treatment, and use area requirements. Regulations for non-potable uses of recycled water have not been updated in 20 years. SB 31 seeks to clarify current policies and to in order to expand the safe use of recycled water. The next slide. Just to continue on the summary, SB 31 does the following. It ensures that homeowners associations do not have to install expensive and cumbersome new plumbing systems to use recycled water. It enables parks to expand their use of recycled water. It ensures that using recycled water in decorative bodies of water, such as lakes at a golf course, is not deterred by overly burdensome regulations. And it also allows food handling and processing facilities to use recycled water for toilet or urinal flushing or outdoor irrigation, as long as the recycled water does not enter a room where food handling or processing occurs. Next slide, please.
What page are we on here?
I'm sorry, apologies. We are on page 16 of the agenda packet. A little bit more background for you. Newsom's water supply strategy set ambitious targets for the use of recycled water. That target was 800,000 acre feet by 2030 and 1.8 million acre feet by 2040. In reporting year 23, statewide use equaled 717 acre feet. And so this shows that the state is on its way to meeting its 2030 goals, but more work needs to be done to hit that 1.8 million acre feet goal in 2040. SB 31 was introduced January 2nd. It's authored by Senator Jerry McNerney. The bill is sponsored by Water Reuse California, and Aqua has a favor position on it. It's currently referred to the Senate Committees on Natural Resources and Water and Environmental Quality. Move on to the next slide, please. As far as the benefit to West Basin, this year, West Basin celebrates its 30th anniversary of recycled water, having produced over 265 billion gallons to date. The West Basin Board adopted its annual legislative and regulatory priorities earlier this year. And priority number five states support policies for the management and expansion of recycled water supplies and its many uses, including indirect potable reuse, direct potable reuse, and stormwater, while reducing regulatory burdens on recycled water providers. Support policies to keep regulations at pace with technology. We go to the next slide. Just to reiterate the staff recommendation, it's that the board adopt a support position on SB 31. That concludes the presentation, and happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you for the presentation. Are there any questions?
No.
All right, I do have a question. Who is against any opposition to this bill?
It's very early in the legislative process, and we have not seen any opposition to this bill at the moment, but we're happy to follow up with you once that information becomes available.
No, I mean, I think it's a great bill. I mean, it's relative to what recycle water, and most people support that. I just thought I'd ask the question, but you don't need to really follow up, I don't believe, unless other board members would like a follow-up on that question. Any board members? No, I think we're good. EJ, is the member part, can we move this forward with a recommendation, or we cannot?
Yes, we can. I discussed that with our board secretary, and because we have the two members of the committee here, we can move that forward to the full board on consent. If any member of the board of directors would like to have a discussion, they can pull it from consent.
All right, Director Deere, are you in agreement?
Yeah, I move we approve.
Okay, thank you. All right, and thank you, Augustine, for your presentation. Thank you. We'll go to so we'll move it forward with the recommendation for approval. We'll go to 5B, please. Would you please present it, Mr. General Manager?
Yes, Madam Chair. This next item is item 5B, begins on packet page 19. And the item is to adopt a support position on AB 580, surface mining related to Metropolitan Water District of Southern California. And for this presentation, we have Augustine Hahn.
Thank you, EJ. Thank you, members of the committee. Desiree, if we could go to the presentation, please, which begins on packet page 27. Just in summary for you, the Public Resources Code section 2714 exempts Metropolitan Water District from certain surface mining and reclamation, or SMARA, requirements for emergency excavations, allowing Metropolitan to file a single reclamation plan with oversight by the State Mining and Geology Board instead of multiple local governments. This avoids redundant approvals and reporting while ensuring compliance with the Colorado River Aqueduct. This section of the Public Resources Code exists because Metropolitan previously sponsored AB 442, which was authored by then Assemblymember Mays. That bill allowed for this single reclamation plan to be filed instead of the multiple county level approvals. That bill included a sunset date of January 1, 2026, and that was to assess Metropolitan's progress with this policy. If we can move on to the next slide. Since AB 442 took effect in 2022, Metropolitan has worked with affected counties to ensure compliance, completed all required technical studies and approvals required by the board, and successfully passed all inspections and provided financial assurances to the board. This bill, Assembly Bill 580, would remove that sunset date, ensuring that Metropolitan could continue using this proven process, allowing for faster and more reliable repairs to water infrastructure, reducing administrative burdens on counties, maintaining environmental oversight without delays, and preventing unnecessary compliance costs. Making this a streamlined process permanent ensures safe, efficient, and cost-effective maintenance of the Colorado River Aqueduct. Moving on to the next slide. little bit more background for you. The CRA, the Colorado River Aqueduct, is a critical water supply lifeline for 19 million Southern Californians. Since its completion in 1941, Metropolitan has used the land and materials surrounding the CRA to repair damage from storms, floods, and other essential maintenance. In 2017, Metropolitan learned that these long-standing maintenance activities now required compliance with SMARA, which is enforced at the county level, as we mentioned, and this created duplicative, inconsistent permitting requirements across multiple counties, delaying essential infrastructure repairs. And that's why Metropolitan sought the previous legislation. AB 580 was introduced on February 12th, authored by Assemblymember Greg Wallace. It's sponsored by Metropolitan Water District. Aqua has a favor position on it, and it's currently referred to the Assembly Natural Resources and Water Parks and Wildlife Committees. Next slide, please. Just to reiterate the benefits to West Basin, we mentioned the annual legislative and regulatory priorities that the board set earlier this year. Priority number 1 states support policies that advance statewide and regional imported water reliability from the State Water Project and Colorado River, while ensuring high quality water supplies from these primary imported sources. Based on that priority, moving on to the next slide, please. The staff recommendation is that the board adopt a support position on AB 580. That concludes the presentation.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions? Director Deere?
No, thank you.
Director Fabai?
Director Fabai is not in attendance today.
Oh, anyone else there? Any director?
No.
Okay, all right. Okay, Director Deere, you okay to move it forward?
Yes, I am.
Okay, thank you. All right, we will move it forward with the recommendation. Thank you very much for the presentation. All right, item 6, information calendar 6A, please.
Yes, Madam Chair, this item begins on packet page 33. It's our monthly state and federal legislative update for February 2025. For this presentation, we have Matt Bay, our Manager of Water Policy and Resources Development.
Thank you, BJ, and good afternoon, Chair Gray and Director Deere. If I could have you turn to first to page 33 of the agenda packet, that's where this item begins. I'd also just note that the monthly NPA state report begins on page 35. There's also a state bill report that's on page 39. And then the federal BSA report is provided as a handout today. And then we're also going to go through some slides that was also provided as a handout to the directors. So Desiree, if we could move to the first slide, please. The next slide. There we go. Thank you. So I know I'm kind of preaching to the choir here, Director Gray, as you were one of the directors to attend our Sacramento trip a couple of weeks ago, but just wanted to reiterate from staff's perspective that the trip was a success, and just wanted to say that we thought the directors all just did a great job in all of the meetings that we had. It was a long day, it was a busy day, and I know we received a lot of great feedback from the different elected offices. And I also want to thank NPA, Emily Pappas and Jamie Miner for coordinating everything for us throughout the last month or two, putting together all the meetings with the different offices. Just a great job top to bottom. So, and just to reiterate here, we did have, by my count, 11 meetings on March 4th. And I'll just go through the list of individuals or offices that we met with. This was Assemblymember Jackie Irwin, Assemblymember Josh Lowenthal, Assemblymember Isaac Bryan, Assemblymember Rick Chavez-Ver, Assemblymember Mike Gibson, Assembly Speaker Robert Rivas, Assemblymember Almer Suchi, Senator Ben Allen, Senator Lola Smallwood Cuevas, Governor Gavin Newsom, Senator Laura Richardson, and State Water Resources Control Board, Board Member Nicole Morgan. I believe we also had a meeting with, Senator McKenna's office as well. So maybe it was 12 meetings, my count might have been off. But regardless to say, it went great. If we could go to the next slide. On the next slide there, these just some more photos from the day, and then also just we received a copy of a letter from the governor's office, who, while we didn't meet specifically with Governor Newsom, he did provide a very nice and personal letter to President Gray, just thanking him for the Legislator of the Year award that we presented to his office. So a very nice touch from the governor's office. Go ahead and go forward to the next slide now. So kind of getting into the meat of the presentation, the bill introduction deadline was on February 21st, so a few weeks back. I think we've mentioned this before, but the legislature has a more limited number of bills that they can introduce this year. Each were limited to 35 bills each. So still a huge number of bills have been introduced this session. 2,350 were introduced by the February 21st deadline. A number of them are still in spot form, will continue to be amended and revised in the coming months. So staff, West Basin staff, our state lobbyist, NPA, we're still going through all the bills and starting to analyze them and take them for possible positions over the next couple to few months of this year. We can move to the next slide. Just wanted to go through a list of some of those bills that kind of have risen up in our minds as possible of more interest or priority type bills, bills that we've touched on before in the past. So just to give an update first on AB 523, this is by Assembly Member Jackie Irwin, and this relates to Metropolitan Water District and allowing them, member agencies with one representative, to have an alternate on the board of directors as needed. So this is a bill that's sponsored by Eastern Municipal Water District. Metropolitan took it to their ledge committee and board last week. Just as an information item, they did say that they expect to take it possibly for a position in April. So we'll be on the lookout for that. Also, they did mention that there was an amendment to the bill recently to change it from being an alternate to a proxy. And that is there is a important distinction there, because the alternate essentially gives that alternate authority to vote however they want on any issue that's comes before Metropolitan. Whereas a proxy is somebody who's voting on behalf of that primary member in a way that that primary member directs them to vote. So that is an important distinction to make. And that might allow some of the member agencies that might have been concerned or possibly even opposed to this bill to go neutral on it. We have yet to kind of see how that plays out. I guess the other thing to note here is that this new language with the proxy would still only apply to agencies with one representative. So since West Basin has two representatives, we would not, at this time, how the bill's written, have the ability to designate any proxies for that. And so that's, again, what we expect to hear more on that bill next month at Metropolitan, and we'll continue to track that for the board. The next bill on the list there is SB 3894. This is by Senator Ben Allen. This relates to water theft and fire hydrants. It's a bill that is sponsored by our friends Las Virgenes Municipal Water District. Aqua is also a sponsor of that bill. It's actually set to be heard later this week. It's a bill that staff, Augustine and I have reached out to all of our retailers to see if water theft is an issue for them in their service areas. And pretty uniformly we've heard back that no, it's not a big issue. They do have some theft of the fire hydrants themselves, but in terms of water theft, bypassing the meter, messing with the meter, things like that, it's not a big issue. And so it's unlikely that we would take this to the board for any sort of position. But again, it's another bill that's important to the water industry at large, and we'll continue to track it. AB 259 is the next one on the list. This relates to open meetings and allowing board members to participate remotely. There was a bill 2 or 3 years ago, I believe, AB 2449, which allows for remote participation or just cause to participate remotely in committee and board meetings. Essentially, what this bill would do is that bill is scheduled to have a sunset date, I believe, at the end of this year. And so this bill, AB 259, would eliminate that sunset and allow it to continue for a longer, if not permanent, type of basis. This bill is supported by Aqua. It's sponsored by Three Valleys Municipal Water District and the California Special Districts Association. And again, it's just another maybe good policy bill for public agencies to have that flexibility going forward. AB 532, or let me set this up. There's a couple of water rate assistance bills that I'll speak to briefly here. This is an issue that we know is important to the board of directors here at West Basin. There's one bill that's kind of being sponsored by public agencies or the water industry, and then there's one that's being sponsored more by the environmental justice community. So that first one, AB 532, that's the one that's being sponsored by CMUA, California Municipal Utilities Association. It does have a favor position by Aqua. It's currently referred to the Assembly Environmental Safety and Toxic Materials Committee. This is a bill that we may look at and track and possibly take for a position later on this year. Kind of want to see how both of these bills go. I would suspect at some point they might negotiate possibly combining the two measures into one measure at some point. They could become a 2-year bill. I don't think anything's going to get figured out right away, but that's the first one, SB 350. That's the one I mentioned is by the environmental justice community. Aqua has an opposed unless amended on that bill. They do see some concerns with that bill. So again, that's why West Basin wants to be part of that conversation, be involved with Aqua and our other coalition members, continue to track this bill, and if needed, we certainly could bring one of those, if not both of those bills for a position in the future, but we kind of want to see how those play out for now. And then the last one on this slide is SB 724 by our own Senator Richardson relating to public housing and public water systems. This is a bill that would require public water systems that serve public housing or city-owned housing to provide information to those residents regarding any programs that exist to offer free lead testing. So kind of a consumer protection, environmental justice type of bill. It seems to be somewhat in a spot position still. I think it'll continue to be amended and changed in the coming months. This is another bill that the water industry will be tracking very closely, as there are, potential impacts to our public agencies. And so we'll continue to bring this one back as we learn more information. This bill is referred currently to the Senate Committee on Environmental Quality. And then moving to the next slide, go through a few more bills here. The first one is SB 601, again by our own Senator Ben Allen, relating to water and waste discharge. I'll just be honest, this is a huge bill. It's going to have a ton of attention on it in the legislature, in the water industry. If you've seen any news articles on this bill, which there have been plenty, it's the words of Trump proofing, come up related to this. But this bill relates to water quality, to permitting, to waste discharge, to waters of the United States. There's a lot going on with this bill. There's a lot of work going into analyzing this bill. We're working with our own operations team to analyze, some of the potential impacts of this. We're also very in tune with Aqua and other coalition members to look at this. This bill is referred to Senate Environmental Quality, and it's going to be heard on April 2nd. And actually at 2 p.m. today, Aqua is going to be discussing that to take a position on it. They are currently recommending an opposed position on this bill. There's concerns that this bill does go farther than what, the proponents are claiming. Says it's supposed to protect local municipalities. So there's concerns that it would actually might do the opposite. So there's a lot more further discussion on this. We're not prepared to take any sort of position on this bill right now, but we are tracking it very closely and, could bring it back. We'll likely bring it back every month going forward just to give you status updates on this bill and whether or not we want to take a position on it. The next bill is SB 454, which is referred to Senate Environmental Quality. It's also set to be heard on April 2nd. This is the bill that would set up a PFAS mitigation program. Again, in West Basin service area, PFAS isn't as big of as an issue as it might be elsewhere in the state and in Southern California, but it is something that we track very closely. Cal Cities, Aqua are sponsors of this bill. It could be one that we might want to take a support position on in the future, but again, I want to kind of see how this one plays out over the next maybe a month or two to see if any more amendments come through on that one. And then AB 794 by Assemblymember Gabriel. This relates to emergency regulations related to PFAS. Again, this is another bill with concerns by the water industry. Aqua does have an oppose unless amended on this bill. It would essentially allow the State Water Board to adopt emergency regulations relating to drinking water standards for PFAS that go kind of beyond what the federal, regulations require. So there are obviously some issues with that. Those are currently being fleshed out through this legislative process. We don't have any sort of position recommendation on this one right now. Just we want to continue to track it because it does impact the industry at large. And then SB 682, another bill by Senator Allen. This one seems a little more straightforward. It's also going to be heard in Senate Environmental Quality on April 2nd. Aqua was also discussing this bill at 2 p.m. today with a favor recommendation. And this one really just would be a good bill because it would serve to prohibit the distribution, the selling, or the offering for sale of products with intentionally added PFAS. So those are, PFAS gets into products, it gets into our local waterways, so eventually it can get into groundwater, can get into wastewater with downstream impacts. So it seems like a pretty good bill. Again, it's got a favored position at Aqua, so this could be one, again, that we might want to consider a position on in the future. And then just a couple last ones here, AB 638 relating to reuse and irrigation. This one's set for a hearing next week in Assembly Safety and Toxic Materials. It would require the State Water Board to establish guidance for stormwater capture and reuse for the irrigation of urban public lands as defined. Because West Basin has such a robust, relationship with, LA County, and we're part of, the Safe Clean Water program. And because we have such close ties there, this is a bill of potential interest for us to track and to see how this could possibly benefit our service area and LA County at large. So again, not a position type of bill right now, but one that we're certainly tracking. And then finally, the last one here is potable water, non-functional turf by Senator Stern. He's just outside of our service area, but really this bill would move up the compliance date for HOAs and those types of properties by 1 year with which to comply with the non-functional turf irrigation ban. So I think it would move it up from 2029 to 2028. Not a big deal, but if that does happen, it's just something for West Basin to know as we do our outreach, as we do our education of our CII and business communities with, getting them to comply with this law in the future. There's also a number of wildfire legislative bills that we'll get to in future meetings. A number of them that we can talk about, but I just wanted to put that as another area where we're tracking. All right, and we can move over to the next slide. Some more good news here just on the State Water Project. So in the last couple of weeks, DWR announced an increase in the allocation of the State Water Project from 20% to 35%. And I don't want to steal Tammy's thunder, but it's a very good increase. It essentially allows Metropolitan Water District to not have to go into any of their reserves for this next year. So, even if it's a dry year the rest of the year, with this allocation, Metropolitan's in good shape and won't have to go, dig into their storage accounts that they have on the state side. So a good news story there. And now I'm going to turn it over to Augustine to take the next few slides of the state update.
Thanks, Matt. We could go to the next slide. The Assembly Select Committee on Permitting Reform released the Permitting Reform Report on March 4th. This is the culmination of a year's worth of work by the Select Committee to explore permitting challenges across California. The findings confirm that California's permitting system not only hinders progress, but drives up costs and delays projects communities desperately need to address interconnected housing and climate crises. Specifically regarding water infrastructure, the report states that drought mitigation, flood control, and sea level rise adaptation projects require multiple agency approvals, creating years-long delays for infrastructure that are needed to protect or provide essential services to millions. This Assembly Select Committee was chaired by Assemblymember Buffy Wicks, and the committee conducted extensive public engagement throughout the process, holding 4 public meetings, conducting site visits across the state, and engaging more than 100 stakeholders. To move on to the next slide, please. The Legislative Analyst Office released a report on Governor Newsom's proposal for the Prop 4 expenditures. Governor Newsom proposed to spend nearly $2.7 billion from Prop 4 in fiscal year 26. The Legislative Analyst Office provided analysis arguing that a multi-year spending approach provides funding certainty to state agencies and programs that receive grant funding. However, it could limit legislative deliberations around newer, less established programs that could benefit from closer oversight, such as extreme heat. Analysts also recommended that lawmakers consider passing legislation to require annual reporting on the degree to which funded projects have helped California reach climate goals laid out under Proposition 4. Moving on to the next slide. Governor Newsom celebrated the release of $315 million by the Trump administration for the state's Sites Reservoir project and the existing San Luis Reservoir on February 25th. This is a releasing of funds that were originally awarded under the previous administration. Just kind of a high-level overview of Sites funding so far. It's received $46.75 million in early funding from the state. It's eligible for $875 and change million of Prop 1 funding, and the total project cost is estimated at $4 billion. Just for some background, Sites Reservoir is proposed to capture water during wet seasons and store it for use during drier seasons. And it's proposed to hold up to 1.5 million acre feet of water, enough to supply water to over 4.5 million homes per year. We can move on to the next slide, please. Just some other state legislative updates for you. Newsom sends a letter to the State Water Resources Control Board in support of Delta conveyance on February 18th. The letter begins by noting he and the preceding 2 governors have supported a DCP of some kind because California's prosperity depends on it. The State Water Project has made it possible for Californians to evolve into the economic powerhouse it has become. And he also urges the State Water Resources Control Board to grant petition to amend water rights permits to accommodate proposed Delta Conveyance project would be in the public's best interest. On to the next bullet, the LAO, or the Legislative Analyst Office, handout to the Senate Budget Subcommittee on Resources, Environmental Protection, and Energy, which is chaired by Senator Allen. And this was just a handout discussing the Prop 4 spending plan, and it basically mirrors the recommendations of the Legislative Analyst Report on the governor's budget that we covered in the preceding slides. Just an update on the 2026 governor's race. Speculation that Kamala Harris will run is out there, and it also threatens a complete makeover of the current field. The current field right now is said to contain the likes of Katie Porter, Lenny Kounalakis, Antonio Villaraigosa, Tony Thurmond, Tony Atkins, Betty Yee, and Javier Becerra. Several hopefuls are expected to drop out if Kamala Harris enters, triggering a domino effect of hopefuls seeking other offices. Races of the lieutenant governor, treasurer, and other offices are only becoming more packed. And then onto the next bullet point here, Newsom targeting Prop 4 funds to help balance fiscal year 26 budget. The administration is proposing to backfill earlier general fund commitments with Prop 4 funds. The climate bond funding was intended to be additive to other funding available for climate efforts, and these monies are critical resources for climate adaptation. Water Reuse and Aqua asked that they reject these reversions. Notably, impacting West Basin is $51 million for water recycling. Backfilling with Prop 4 funds only reduces the number of projects that can get funded. With the number of projects waiting for funding, it is critical that that 51 million be restored in the budget.
And Chair Gray, that concludes our state report. We can pause for any questions before we move on to our federal update.
All right, thank you. Director Deere, do you have any questions?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Okay. Just comments regarding the state trip. It was very successful, I thought, and want to thank the directors who were able to make the trip, and they well represented the full board. The letter from the governor was really on behalf of the full board, thanking the full board for the acknowledgement. And so hopefully that was sent out to the full board so that they could see the letter. I thought our lobbying group, Jamie and Emily, were excellent in terms of the schedule itself. And I think we were very productive in those meetings. I mean, there was a good exchange of information and conversation between staff, and we met also with some of the actual legislators and West Basin staff and the board. We did meet with the speaker directly, which was a great meeting. And some of the legislators we did invite out to visit our water recycling plant. I want to thank Matt and EJ for helping with making sure we had a very productive meeting. And so I was very pleased with the conversations that went on in those meetings. So again, thank you to everybody involved. So with that, if there are no other comments or questions, we can move to the next item. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Chair Gray. So we'll now move to the federal update. And this was provided to the directors as a handout. Thank you, Desiree. So the first thing I'll talk about is with the state trip kind of in our rear view mirror now. We're now looking forward to our Washington, D.C. advocacy trip, which will take place at the end of next month in April. So the dates for that are April 28th to April 30th. That's a Monday through Wednesday. And I know that Desiree is working with the directors to see who might be able to attend. But put together, working with VSA staff to begin putting the invitations out to our elected offices and to the other agencies that we want to meet with, including Army Corps, Bureau of Reclamation, anyone else. We're going to start putting those invitations out later this month into early April. And so we'll definitely keep the board updated as to what those schedules kind of look like. But again, it's a very packed schedule for anyone who's been on the trip before. Tuesday and Wednesday will especially be packed days. And we're just looking forward to going back there and hoping for good weather during the trip. But I know that it'll be a very packed and efficient trip with VSA helping us out there. So we can move to the next slide. And some good news just to provide is that the federal government shutdown that was set to occur last week was averted. There was essentially a full year long-term continuing resolution that was put into place that will maintain funding for the federal government through the end of September, through the end of the current fiscal year. It happened on a very close party line vote in the House. And then once that happened, it did go over to the Senate, which again, there was a lot of wrangling back and forth on votes and whether or not they could invoke cloture is what they call for the vote, which they did get by having 9 Democratic senators to invoke cloture. And then once that happened, they took a final vote, and that passed, I believe, on a 54-46 vote to pass the full year continuing resolution. That happened last Friday, and then on Saturday, President Trump signed the bill into law. So the government is essentially funded for at least the next, about 5-6 months. So hopefully that'll minimize some of the impacts that would have been expected if the government had actually shut down. One thing to note is just in terms of the earmark requests and approvals that would have happened this year, because we're being funded through a continuing resolution and not appropriations. Those earmark requests are essentially zeroed out, and they'll have to, any agency that applied for funding that way will have to apply again this coming year. West Basin did not have any earmark requests this past year. We might for this coming year. And so that's just something that we'll kind of have to balance in case any of the past year's requests get carried over to the next year. Next slide, please. Then I'll just touch on a couple federal bills of interest to us. Earlier this month, Representative Jared Huffman, who's a Democrat from Northern California, was one of the co-authors of a reintroduction of a bill called the Water Conservation Rebate Tax Parity Act, which would essentially allow folks that apply for and receive water conservation rebates to not have to pay federal income tax on those rebates. So it's not treated as income. And West Basin has been a supporter of this type of legislation for a long time. We've previously supported and endorsed similar bills in the past that have never been passed, unfortunately. But we're a longtime supporter of that. And in 2022, West Basin did support AB 2142, which was a state version of this, which would exclude specifically turf rebates from state income tax liability. This is a very straightforward bill. I believe that because we were a supporter last year on a similar piece of legislation, we're already considered kind of part of the supporters on this bill. But we do plan to bring this legislation to the board for support position next month, just to make it kind of official. And then moving to the next slide, another piece of legislation that we've supported, similar attempts in the past, relates to PFAS liability protection. So there was a reintroduction of this bill in February, and it provides protections for water and wastewater utilities related to different types of PFAS liability under the super hazard or super fund sites, hazardous sites. This is something that we've worked very hard to make sure that recycled water providers such as West Basin are also not subject to liability. We don't want it to only be for water and wastewater utilities, but recycled water providers should also have that same protection. So we'll make sure to make those comments as part of this. But again, this is something that we supported last year, and it's something that, again, we're considered a supporter of. But again, this would be something that we would take to the board for an official support position in April as well. And with that, for the last 3 or 4 slides here, I'll turn it back over to Augustine to close it out.
Thank you, Matt. Moving on to some of the administration's actions. The USBR staffing cuts and restoration. The Trump administration has been taking aggressive actions to reduce federal agency staff. The California regional office of the USBR in Temecula indicated that it had lost about 10% of its staff. On February 27th, major California water managers urged the White House to hold back on staff reductions at the USBR. Following that was also a similar urging from Central Valley ag community. And then on March 7th, the administration indicated it was pulling back on staff firings at those USBR offices in California and pausing additional planned terminations. Amidst these developments, California Senators Padilla and Schiff wrote Burgum, the new secretary, and other interior officials in early March demanding information on the firings. Moving on to the next slide. The Department of Government Efficiency moves to terminate over 700 federal office leases as part of the broader push by the administration to slash the federal government's footprint. The DOGE team has announced more than 700 lease terminations. These are slated for offices where it housed employees in the West. The Southern California field office in Temecula was listed as one of those, along with the Pacific Northwest regional office in Boise, Idaho. Moving on to the next slide. The Lower Colorado System Conservation Program, established by Congress through the 2022 Inflation Reduction Act, helped raise the elevation of Lake Mead. That has now been paused by Executive Order 1415. The order is titled Unleashing American Energy and requires all agencies to immediately pause the disbursement of funds appropriated through the IRA. On March 4th, 6 senators from Western states, led by Senator Padilla, wrote a letter to Interior Secretary Burgum urging the Department of the Interior to curtail the funding freeze as it could endanger the flow of the Colorado River. We can move on to the next slide, please. A little news from the EPA. On February 11th, the administration nominated Jessica Kramer to become the lead for the EPA's water office. Kramer served as a policy counsel in the Office of Water during Trump's first term. In 2022, she worked for a firm which lobbied Congress on issues relating to forever chemicals. And Kramer's nomination is still awaiting consideration by the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee. On to the final slide. Judge rules that thousands of fired federal workers must be rehired on March 13th. Ordered to rehire tens of thousands of probationary employees who were fired amid President Donald Trump's turbulent effort to drastically shrink the federal bureaucracy. U.S. District Judge William Alsup described the mass firings as a sham strategy by the government's Central Human Resource Office to sidestep legal requirements for reducing the federal workforce. He ordered that the Defense, Treasury, Energy, Interior, Agriculture, and Veteran Affairs departments to immediately offer all fired probationary employees their jobs back. Judge also issued his ruling in a lawsuit brought by federal employee unions, along with nonprofit groups that said their work would be negatively impacted by the firings in places like national parks and veterans hospitals.
And I just have one last update for this committee, and bit of good news. I think I had informed the board last month that Metropolitan Water District had put a pause on some of their grass replacement rebate funding because of their own U.S. Bureau of Reclamation grant funding. So we weren't receiving those dollars. However, they just informed us, I believe last week, that pause has now been undone. And so they are able to resume funding our grass replacement rebates. Because we have our own grant funding right now, we're going to continue to use our own grant funds for the remainder of this fiscal year. But then going into next fiscal year, we'll be able to utilize kind of the full funding that Metropolitan Water District offers. So it was good to see while all this other stuff kind of unfolds that the Metropolitan is less impacted than they had been a month ago. So I just wanted to mention that. And that concludes our federal report. And we're open for any questions that the committee might have.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much for the presentation. Director Dare, any questions?
No, thank you.
All right, no questions. Great reports from everyone. The next item is closed session. Do we have any closed session? EJ?
Madam Chair, we actually have one additional information item. It's our monthly Metropolitan Water District program update.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, we do. Item B. All right. Thank you.
No worries, Madam Chair. This item is 6D, begins on fact page 59. And for this presentation, we have Tammy Hurley-High, the Senior Water Policy and Resources Analyst.
Thank you,
Thank
EJ. So good afternoon, Chair Gray and Member Deere. So this report summarizes updates on recent activities at Metropolitan. This information begins on page 59 of the committee packet. And we also have PowerPoint slides that begin on page 72 of the packet. So we can go to the PowerPoint slide, please. Thank you. So just to review a recap of a few items Metropolitan was discussing and reviewing recently. Last month, the board authorized this item. It was the Water Sales Transfers and Exchange Program. This will allow the general manager to execute transfers and exchanges to other state water project management areas during 2025 and 2026. So this will allow staff to sell water, which will generate revenues that are needed. And they were identified in the current biennium budget that was adopted last April. This item will allow staff to acquire supplies if needed also in 2026 in case there are dry conditions that end up turning, that come back. So Metropolitan staff has brought this item to committee members throughout the past few months to gain input and feedback from committee members. Just showing a copy of it, one of the slides in their presentations here. These new revenues would be generated by water sales, leveraging their record high storage levels that they have right now. And these types of water transactions have the potential to provide significant benefits to Metropolitan and will allow them to better respond to fluctuating hydraulic and market conditions. The sale of water to outside agencies to generate new revenues will create regional benefits from surplus supply. And this will be a 2-year program. And also they have established an ad hoc committee in order to provide ongoing oversight of this program. And if we can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So this is related to the remainder of the information in this report, by the way, is just for information item. So regarding the draft climate adaptation policy framework, this climate adaptation master plan for water continues to be reviewed by the committee and task force members. And, they've been discussing this for quite some time now. And this item has been prepared through several committees. The discussions with the subcommittee on the long-term regional planning, the Camp for Water Task Force, and the One Water Committee and the Finance Committee. So this policy framework is one of the core components of the Camp for Water Task Force Charter. And a lot of progress has been made on several items so far. And last month was the discussion on the policies, initiative, and the partnerships. And the task force members, along with Metropolitan staff, have developed a set of policies to help guide the work at Metropolitan. And this framework is an important piece of the Climate Adaptation Master Plan. This process is now moving from a planning process to an implementation mode. And the framework includes initiatives behind each of the overarching 5 policy areas, including policy statements for each of the Camp for Water. And these are being built upon and expanded upon existing climate-related policies, such as the Bay Delta Policy Framework and the Watershed Management Plans. So this policy framework is a driver for future action to guide initiatives and partnerships moving forward in order to implement a climate adaptation across the agency. The next steps on this item, later this month, on March 26th, the Camp for Water implementation strategy will be reviewed. And then in April, the board will consider approval of the final Camp for Water implementation strategy. If we can move to the next slide, please. So regarding the business model refinement work group, the member agency, this is a member agency-led business model work group. They have continued to make progress towards shaping near-term recommendations. This work group is developing and prioritizing potential refinement options to focus on areas of near-term refinements and long-term refinements. Through this process, there are 3 sub-working groups that have been established with the member agencies. And the first is a financial policy sub-working group, as shown on the right side of this slide. The member agency sub-working group addresses the treated water surcharge and cost recovery options, the reserve policy, the water sales assumption for budgeting purposes, and fixed versus variable income. Just want to also mention that our staff, including our general manager and department manager, are actively engaged in these discussions. We're providing input on their analysis and alternatives for treatment cost recovery alternatives. So this financial policy sub-working group had their final meeting just this morning. And in April, information on treated cost recovery options and fixed versus volumetric revenues and reserves that are developed from this group will be presented to Metropolitan Finance Committee members. If we can go to the next slide, please. So there are 2 other sub-working groups that have been established with the member agencies. The Water Resources Sub-Working Group for member agencies are reviewing with Metropolitan staff in the Water Resources Management section on member agency local supply exchanges, water sales outside of Metropolitan service area, and Metropolitan's role in conservation and local resource development. The Engineering Sub-Working Group is, again, for member agencies to discuss with Metropolitan staff in the engineering section of their goals to enhance the infrastructure reliability, the resilience, and the flexibility by identifying key projects and initiatives. And if we can go to the next slide, please. So I just want to also update you on there have been changes to the committee modifications. And the board approved recommendation from the chair. They outlined various committee appointments and proposed board organizational changes for the Metropolitan chair's 2nd term for approval. So this provides the chair's recommendation for the creation of subcommittees. And on this list here is the items that were approved by the board. The standing committee appointments, the chair had requested that the board members rank their preferred committees, chairs and vice chairs. On the planning committee, the long-term planning subcommittee will continue to be housed under the finance committee. And there will be a new imported water subcommittee that will be housed under the One Water Committee. There will also be new ad hoc committees. External appointments are made for members representing Metropolitan to external organizations that include the Colorado River Board and the Palo Verde Land Management Committee, the Bay Delta Construction Authority, the Bay Delta Finance Authority, and the National Water Research Institute. And also a few committees have been eliminated, but just as a committee itself. And one is the Pure Water Southern California Regional Conveyance. Now, however, future meetings here will be scheduled on an as needed basis to review critical milestones of the project. There will also be no longer a subcommittee on demand management and conservation program, but instead demand management and conservation will be treated as a higher priority during the One Water Committee. And lastly, there is a change in of a committee, Community and Workforce Climate Committee, which will encompass all of the EEO and workplace type of issues, including ethics. Also included in the board report is attachments that include the monthly update on the items that were voted on by the board members, summary of the voting results, and a summary of the board agenda for March. And if we can move to the next slide, please. So just a brief look again this month on the water supply conditions. These graphics depict the conditions as of February 20th. And Lake Oroville's reservoir continued to be managed under flood control releases while continuing to conserve as much water as possible. Currently, the lake's storage is approaching close to 2.9 million acre feet. As a result of recent storms during the part of early February and healthy gain to Lake Oroville, DWR has announced another increase to the State Water Project allocation to 35%, which is what had been earlier. So this year did start out dry, but we're seeing changes, and with more storms that have and will continue to occur, there's a good chance that DWR might increase the allocation again sometime soon. The Colorado River system is tracking a little below average. Lake Mead's elevation is 1,068 feet in elevation, and the storage capacity is 34%. Currently, for imported supplies, Metropolitan will be receiving about 669,000 acre feet from the State Water Project and 781,000 acre feet from the Colorado River Aqueduct, with a total of 1.44 million acre feet. Metropolitan is anticipating demand from member agencies to be 1.45 million acre feet. So now, again, as Matt had mentioned earlier, with the increase of the State Water Project allocation, it now puts Metropolitan in a balanced operating condition without the need to use water from the storage reserve to meet the member agency demands. So that concludes this update. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tammy. Director Deere, any questions?
No, thank you.
Right. Tammy, thank you very much. I don't have any questions, but thank you so much for that update. Item 7, I believe. Is there a closed session, EJ?
We have no closed session items.
All right. Thank you. The next item, director's comment, future agenda item. Director Deere.
Nothing.
All right. Thank you, staff. Those are my comments. Appreciate all the reports this morning to everyone. So with that, is there any other issue or item, General Manager EJ?
We have no more items. Just a very special thank you to Matt Bay for all the work that was put into our our Sacramento trip. Obviously, MPA does an amazing job for us in Sacramento, but we couldn't do it without him and as well as Augustine Hahn here locally.
How many directors went?
We had 4 directors. there.
Very good. You have the new one also?
Yep.
Excellent, excellent.
That's all I have, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I thank you for saying that, and I want to acknowledge again, Matt and Augustine, thank you, because you're right. Nothing can be a success that we do without the good work that staff does, so we're very appreciative. So with that, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you again. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.